Good morning, everyone. Happy fall, I guess I could say, right? That time of the year, although I think it still feels like summertime, which I am not complaining. If anyone knows me, I'm from the South and the heat is what I love. So it is lovely outside to me. It's nice though to have no smoke. I hear people nodding. Hopefully others don't have smoke either. So, all right. Let's see, we have about 20 folks on the line. I'm sure a few more will be joining us. They usually do, and then hop on within the next 10, 15 minutes. But let me honor your time and go ahead and get started. Something we have been doing, Teresa, I'm not sure if we talked about this or not, but can I put you on the spot for an exercise?
Absolutely.
Okay. Something we have started doing within our own staff that, Teresa, I'm sorry I haven't told you this, but everyone knows me, I'm a pretty transparent person, thought was completely wacky the first 2, 3, 4 times probably I did it. But when it's done, like when the exercise is over, I realized that it was necessary. And that is some self-regulation. We recognize that the healthcare is in a crazy state right now. And so we tend to take care of others around us and we're not necessarily taking care of ourselves. So in our meetings, we're taking a few minutes just to do a little bit of self-regulation, some deep breathing, just to kind of get ourselves centered. This is an hour and 45-minute meeting. You guys probably just came from another meeting. And so we're just going to take a breath versus just like running, jumping, and not stopping and breathing. So I'm going to turn it over to Teresa for a few minutes and she'll get us started and then we'll jump into our agenda.
Good morning, everyone.
Teresa, I'm sorry, I should have introduced you.
Yes.
Teresa is a consultant we've worked with, Caroline's worked with on care coordination. So some of you have met her in some of a WPCC meeting, focus group meeting, or if you do some care coordination with Caroline, she's helped with some of those meetings, facilitating that. She is from Emerging Wisdom, and she does a lot of facilitation, hosting, the art of hosting, and really focusing on some self-regulation. And I'll let you introduce yourself further.
Good morning, everyone. I've been out sharing and teaching around the brain science and neuroanatomy and what are those self-care practices that we need now, especially in this intensity of our Zoom life and what's happening with our bodies, sitting at the screens all day. So I run a self-regulation and co-regulation training program as well. And the beginning of self-regulation really starts with just noticing what's going on in your body right now. So just take a moment and notice what's happening at the top of your spine and what's happening with your brain. And then also we're just going to notice what's happening at the bottom of your spine. Is your tailbone more tucked underneath or is it more aligned? And what's happening all along that spine? How are you breathing right now? Is it more shallow in your neck or high in your lungs, or is it deep in your lungs? And what's happening with your organs? Is there more compression around your organs, or is there a lot of space around your organs? So just take a moment to get your witness in play and notice what's going on in your body right now as you sit the way you usually do for Zoom calls. And in a moment, I'm going to invite us to stand up together. And we're going to set our seat right at the base of our torso. There's 4 bones. So our sitting bones on our left and our right, our sitting bones on the left and the right, and then the pubic bone in the front and the tailbone in the back. And this creates a strong foundation for our body if we've set our seat, got our sitting bones properly positioned. And then it also creates support for our heart and lungs and for our brain. So in a moment, what I'll do is I'll ask you to stand up and then we'll sit back down and we'll send that tailbone out and back so we can get this foundation in play. And you'll just get an opportunity to notice any changes that you experience through this really simple micro move. And we'll do another micro move that helps to create more space for circulation and oxygen flow to our brain as well. So I just invite you, if you're comfortable, to stand up with me. Otherwise, you can just do this seated if that's not comfortable for you. So go ahead and stand on up. And then as you take your seat, you know, you can send your tailbone out and back, or if you prefer, you can imagine imaginary tail feathers or tail and send that tailbone out and back. So we're really creating a foundation here for our whole body, for our breath and for our brain. And so just notice what changes with that. And just to kind of give us some contrast, go ahead and tuck your tailbone under and see what happens with your body as you do that. And then send your tailbone out and back. And then go ahead and tuck that tailbone and breathe while you do this if it's comfortable for you. Just go ahead and breathe and just go back and forth a little bit. And you can just start to notice the changes. What happens as I tuck that tailbone under as I'm seated? What happens as I send that tailbone out and back? We're activating the support system that's always here for us, tucking the tailbone and then sending the tailbone out and back. And just notice what happens with your organs. Notice what changes with your lungs. And then coming right here to the top of your spine, we're just going to imagine you have a balloon inside your brain, and that brain balloon's lifting up. This just creates some room around our brainstem. There's circulation that flows around our brain, down through our whole body, and then back. So we're needing to create a little space so that oxygen and circulation can get to our brain and the energy can get to our brain. So just imagine you have a brain balloon just gently floating up. And breathe. Just notice what's changed in your body with these two simple micro moves. And I'd like to invite observations for what happens as we do this little move to set our seat. Would anybody like to share what they noticed changed in their body as they went from their usual seated posture on Zoom to this posture?
Well, I definitely didn't realize I was crunched up as I was when it first started. So,
and where did you notice you were crunched up?
I think I was just like all bound in the middle. I just felt like, you know, my midsection was just all kind of crunched up.
Yeah, exactly. It's all crunched up. Like there's a compression around all my organs, you know, including my heart and lungs are in this compression, but especially my digestive organs. So setting the seat creates room for all those organs. Yes, absolutely. Who else would like to share? I'd love to hear from one more person.
My posture changed, and it definitely brought to awareness how much I hunch. Right. And why I experience, you know, neck stiffness by turtleneck.
Yeah, by turtling, your turtleneck comes in play. And look at all that's going on right here at the top of your neck as soon as you're turtling here, you know, around your computer. And I turtle a lot. So just this memory of like brain balloon up, like, oh, look, gravity got me down again. You can notice your Zoom screen. I love having my Zoom screen on as a mirror. And then just gravity up, get that brain balloon up. And just not to sit still, just kind of just have that movement in your tail. So then you have all your organs get all of this vital energy and support. And Wendy, do you have just a moment that I could show them the slide of what changes with this simple move? Just put me on permission to share screen. Oh, I can already. I'm already here. Okay. If that's comfortable. Great. Thank you, Wendy.
I didn't realize I was sharing my screen. Thank you.
So here we go. Here's what happens with our bodies with this simple move. Okay, so when that tailbone's tucked, you can see what happens with the head and back because we've got C curve in the spine and that compression in all the organs, and including the heart and the rib cage folded forward. As soon as I tuck my tailbone, my rib cage folds forward. Okay, and so getting that aligned tailbone opens up all this space for energy to come, circulation to our brain, and more room for our heart and lungs. And sometimes people sitting on Zoom can have that extended as well. And that's a little hyperextended, and that can add pain to the back and the body as well when that tailbone's hyperextended. So we're just working to sit to support our body and activate this built-in support system for ourselves. So I just invite you to notice your little mirror here in front of you on Zoom. And during the call, you'll notice sometimes gravity got you down. Okay. And then just gravity up and just see that'll help support you getting more oxygen and circulation to your whole body and your brain. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Teresa. This is something that, yes, I have the worst posture and I'm on Zoom and sitting most of the day. So I really appreciate these reminders, and hopefully as we are the Whole Person Care Collaborative, that we are looking at our whole person as well, not just those around us. So let me share screen once again. I think it's this one, let's hope. Do you guys see the presentation? And
Yes.
notes? Perfect. All right, let's go. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself in chat? Most of us know each other. Just put your organization. It just helps with our minutes, especially if there's anyone else that's new and want to refer back to that. So name and organization in the chat would be great. Thank you. And I'm going to keep going as you guys are doing that. Just to review, last month, Confluence Health and Mid-Valley both did amazing presentations. I put a little bit of a summary there, but I want to point out on this slide that if you go to our website, ncach.org/WPCC, if you missed that, those presentations, they were excellent, as they are every month. Just scroll down. That's the WPCC page. You got to scroll down until you see the meetings. You're probably going to have to click on this box to open it up, and then you can click on the recording. I try to get these uploaded the week of the meeting. I'm not always successful because I download it and then I get it uploaded to YouTube, and then we post a YouTube link to make it easier because of the different systems. And then we did talk a little about the future of WPCC at the last meeting. So if you want to go back, it may be an exercise in futility because we've changed things around, but at least you would hear what your other colleagues are thinking about and some of the struggles that they are anticipating also. Our agenda for today, we'll do announcements and updates. Then we'll have a presentation by Dell at Grant Integrated Services, followed by a presentation from Lisa at Okanagan Behavioral Health Services, and then Behavioral Health Care. Sorry, I always say that wrong. And can I just ask your forgiveness for now and for every time in the future that I say it wrong? After 3 years, 4 years, I should have that down, but that's the one I always mess up. And then we'll talk about the proposed plan and where we are at with that. I am not doing approvals anymore, so we're just going to keep going. If you see something that's not right, Tessa or Diana, if you see a mistake in your summary, let me know and I will switch that. I will get that changed up in a minute. So monthly reports were due last Wednesday. I know that everyone is really busy. I get that, and I understand the stressors and the strains, but please don't forget your reporting. We do take a look at that when we're calculating quarterly payments, and they are based on reporting. So if you haven't done so already, please get that done and get that in ASAP. And thank you for those who were able to get yours in already. We have a population health land tomorrow. We are really excited about this one. We are doing an alien abduction, so it's going to be really cool. And we're going to divide into groups. And what we're asking is we're going to divide in behavioral health and primary care. And we're asking for individuals to bring an issue that they are struggling with, or they're trying to break through and they're struggling with breaking through. And we're going to do an exercise called alien abduction. You may know it as Troika, but it's an opportunity to hear some brainstorming and solution gathering from your colleagues. So we've done this internally. And so Roger, Tina, Connie, and Kathy are going to do it with us. So we have a couple, I think we have one or two, but if you have something burning desire that said yes, please. And even if you're not a part of the land, you're always welcome to join us. And if you don't have the link, let me know and I'll send you the link to come and join us. September QI Affinity Group is coming up the fourth Wednesday of the month from 12 to 1. And Roger's going to be talking about recruitment and retention, which we know is a huge issue right now. And so we're going to be talking about a little more. If you have questions that you would like addressed maybe, or there's something that's you're thinking about and you wanted to just bring that up and ask Roger to touch on it, send that to me ahead of time and I'll forward that on to Roger, and he is willing to incorporate that into his presentation. He's going to do a little bit of content, but he's really going to try to open it up for conversation, because we're all in that boat together, and it's good to hear from your colleagues. In October, I believe it was in the August, maybe the July population health plan that Kathy talked about risk stratification. There continues to be some questions about it and people asking for more information. So we decided to bring that topic to the QI affinity group, which will be in October. And that's kind of an outline of what she will be talking about. So if you don't have those on your schedule, I did send out the calendar invite. If you didn't receive it, let me know, and I will I'll make sure that you're on the list. Two really good affinity groups. We'll do it again, an affinity group in November, which will be the day before Thanksgiving, but we will not have one in December. Just making sure if you're wanting that on your calendar to make sure. And it's the fourth Wednesday from 12 to 1. I think that's all on my announcements. Does anyone from our managed care organizations, our clinical partners, our community-based organizations, does anyone else have any updates that they would like to share? Announcements? Go ahead, Tessa. You're muted. She's probably on the double mute thing.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So like you said, we did a presentation, or I did a presentation on the PHQ implementation that Confluence has been doing for the last couple of years. I know some people had questions about resources we used, in particular, like the scripting or other things, and I would just ask that people contact me directly. I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat and would be happy to talk to anybody that's going through that or wants to know what particular resources we used.
Thanks, Tessa. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. It's that awkward silence. Is anyone going to speak up? Am I going to unmute myself at the same time someone else is going to unmute? We've all been there, right? All right, Tessa's email's in the chat. If you're interested in that, just reach out to her. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dell. Dell, do you want to run your own slides, or would you like me to run them?
If you'll run them, that'd be great.
Okay.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody. So we wanted to provide an update on our 30-day follow-up for ED visits. And you'll notice I changed some of the slides to ER. That was because as I was looking for photos to add, ED was not working for me in Google. That the county was not gonna like what was coming up. So I just switched some of those slides to just reflect that, so I wasn't caught in some weird situation. Anyhow, it's been really an interesting process for us at Grand Integrated Services. Now I want to share some insights that we've gained, our lessons learned. My background is mostly working in a behavioral health program inside a federally qualified health center. And so we became, in those medical centers, we became well acquainted with what our responsibilities as behavioral health providers were to diabetes management, heart disease, chronic pain, as well as the array of behavioral health services that we provided. But when you come over to a community-based behavioral health program, there's a lot of training that needs to occur so that the therapists, the case managers understand what their role is in providing support to quality of life and improving our medical diagnoses as well. So if people have diabetes, what's a mental health therapist's role in that? And the therapist should be encouraging nutrition, should be encouraging daily exercise and those types of things. And so kind of understanding some of that background, it's been nice to provide that support and level of training to the staff, but still the same question loomed when you're looking at ER utilization, what is the therapist or case manager responsibility when we're talking about ER utilization? So to share a little bit about that, in Benton and Franklin counties, they have a program that's called Consistent Care, and that's run through Cadillac Hospital. And what the Consistent Care program, they bring all of the agency providers together. So it's the directors and clinical directors of each of the local agencies there in Benton and Franklin counties. And every month they meet to review cases of individuals that have been overutilized in the ER. And they staff the cases, they talk about community support. Sometimes law enforcement's also involved in those discussions. And it's just a way that we were able to reduce utilization across Benton and Franklin counties as we work with our clients by providing resources, having case managers follow up with them, the therapist meeting with them regularly, and then also including crisis too, because a lot of times when people are overutilized in the ER, it's because they're in crisis situations and they're looking for an immediate resolution to whether it's they've taken more medications than they should, they're medication seeking, they need additional resources. For a variety of reasons, they're using the ER. And so some of that process that we did was trying to work with these individuals that were utilized in the ER and making a clear definition with them. So we made rat cards. They identified when you'd use the ER versus when you'd use urgent care. And so we really started trying to get our clients to understand when they would use ER services versus urgent care for like flu-like symptoms, those kind of things. So leading up to this, as I came on at Grand Integrated Services, we had just implemented the collective medical, and a couple of things that occurred. One is we were getting everybody that was showing up at the Samaritan ER for medical or behavioral health concerns. So we're getting all of that information into our system here. The clinical director at the time was going around. As soon as that report came in that we had someone in the ER, they went and got a staff member and sent them directly to the ER, regardless of if they're there for a medical concern or for behavioral health concern. And so with my experience in this prior, I just thought, oh, whoa, I think we need to wait. We don't want to interrupt a medical appointment if it's there for a medical purpose. And so as we did that, we got a little bit more comfortable and waiting to see what's happening and what the need was for us to respond. And on one situation, we had an individual that went to the ER after being sexually assaulted. And the collective medical report came in, the individual was identified, and then our case manager called the individual the next day and said, so I understand you were at the ER yesterday after being sexually assaulted. That was not the best use of that process, although I think well-intended, that created some confidentiality issues, just potential issues moving forward with that. So we got really clear on what we needed from the clinical perspective. What we were looking for is individuals that were going to the ER for a behavioral health concern. And so for those individuals, we identified that we'd like to have follow-up within 30 days of their ER visit. And so I believe the original goal was that 25% of those visits we would have followed up with. And so that's what I wanted to report on today. I talked with Bill Fody. He's the individual that we have on site that is our utilization reviewer. And I asked him, if you had a vision or that was specific, a vision that was specific to this program, what would you say that was? And he said, to provide timely follow-up services to aid in the individual stabilization recovery, while at the same time assisting to get the individual connected in the community services. And I thought that was an excellent segue into the work that we're doing. So we're really trying to capture those individuals that are overused in the ER, and so we can support and direct them into alternative services and provide what support's needed. So most of the support that we're trying to provide is to make sure they're connected with their mental health provider, whether that's a case manager, therapist, or their prescriber they may be seeing, so we can get them in for services. if there were side effects they were experiencing, a lack of resources they were experiencing. Our goal is to provide support to these individuals and more guidance so that they don't continue to overutilize the ER. Go ahead, next slide, Wendy. So we're looking at the clients that we have, they're 18 years and older. And for those clients that are already established clients of ours, our case managers, our therapists, our prescribers would follow up with. For those clients that are not currently established, our crisis team follows up with. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. So we wanted to increase our follow-up visits for all clients 18 years or older. And then our goal again was 25%. What's interesting about that goal, again, is I've come from the medical side of things. Typically, the way we did it anyways in Tri-Cities is that when we have these goals, we'd work really hard to get them accomplished. So we'd say, okay, an example would be primary care. We wanted to have every client coming in the door identify who their primary care provider was. And so we take 3 weeks when we get everyone coming in the door and everyone that's a current client, and we have 90% we made sure that there was 90% of our clients had their PCP identified. And so just coming here and learning the processes and seeing that more training is needed, I think the goals were set in a way that showed that we were having movement and getting the buy-in of all of our clinicians. And so I think we can do a lot better than 25%. And I really think we need to be looking at every individual that's showing up at the ER for a behavioral health concern, that we're doing some type of follow-up with them shortly after. Although we have a 30-day time frame, we're trying to do it very quickly. So we started receiving these collective medical reports, and then we began to operationalize what that process looked for us so we would have our clinicians follow up over this last year. So looking at just the graph in the last year will show our improvement in follow-up. And so this is the percentage of where we started. Our baseline was 0 because we weren't doing that at all. And then over this last year, you can see the gradual growth each month into the percentage of individuals that we were able to provide a 30-day follow-up after the ER visit. And so just last month, we were right about 38% of the individuals that were seen at the ER, we were able to do a follow-up with. Next slide, please. So just to give you a breakdown, a lot of information for this slide, so I apologize for that, but just a breakdown for just August, we had 11 collective medical notifications. Out of those, 3 of them were the same individual, and then 5 of those 11 did not receive a follow-up. So those are the things we want to be looking into to help increase that, is what occurred there that we didn't provide some level of follow-up to those individuals. One that we followed up with was admitted to Sparks, a SUD inpatient in Spokane. So that was a necessary need. Individual looking for support and services, we were able to connect with the service provider. Another individual was admitted to Smoky Point voluntarily. They lived in the Seattle area, and that worked well for them. Another one was admitted to Parkside. They're following that discharge follow-up, but the phone wasn't service and they were homeless, and you run into some of the same issues with trying to locate people afterwards, are difficult to follow up with. Another individual was admitted to Parkside as well, which is crisis stabilization for our area. Next slide, please. And then just showing that they were at Parkside for 2 days and then left. And so one of the issues that we've run into lately is we can't detain anybody right now because we don't have a way to transport them to a hospital. And so this was another scenario where an individual left Parkside, but they couldn't be picked up because there wasn't a crime being committed. And so just wanted to also show that throughout this process, we're having some challenges, especially where we can't have law enforcement pick individuals up anymore like we had in the past. So out of these 11 notifications, the 6 had follow-up within 30 days. The soonest made was within the same day. The longest took 10 days, and just our overall average over the last year was 2.83 days. So I just wanted to show our progress and what we're doing to help tackle some of these issues that are coming along. And I believe that that's the presentation. I'd be open to questions, discussion, ideas, especially. That'd be awesome.
Thank you, Bill. Feel free to unmute yourself or type a question in. While we're waiting, I'm wondering, are there others who are using collective medical successfully? Are there others who are using it unsuccessfully? Are there some that aren't using it at all? I'm just curious if there's even any answer out there, or you guys are just silent today.
And let's also put that, we can also put it in chat and then also hear from people. Yeah.
OBHC is not using collective medical, but I'd be interested in talking to Dell a little bit more about that and how that works at Grant Integrated. I'll send you an email, Dell.
Perfect. I'll put my email in the chat for those that don't have it.
Thanks, Dell. I'm curious, you guys are using it, what we would call as reactively, meaning you get the report and then you respond. Are you using it proactively where your patients whom you know may be a frequent flyer or could potentially present to the ER that you would put information in?
Yes, so reactively, we are using it in that way. Also, Jackie Weber is doing some regional meetings with us to show us reports of those are overutilizing, and we're still beginning to staff those cases. But from a proactive standpoint, we're aware of the individuals that potentially could, and we're trying to do that prior to them actually overutilizing the ER. So we are trying to take those steps.
Wendy, this is Deb. Certainly in Health Home, we also use collective medical reactively is a good way to put it. We get EDI alerts, kind of like Dell was talking about. I would entertain conversation with any of the partners that use it reactively currently to figure out how can we collaborate, because, you know, 47% I think is the percentile of health home clients who have serious mental illness as a diagnosis. So there's probably some overlap of these clients, and I would love to figure out how to partner better in this whole person care collaborative around that.
Thank you, Deb. Definitely opportunities for collaboration.
Del, are these patients on both the mental health and the SUD side, or is the focus one or the other?
It's both.
Okay.
So yeah, we're talking just behavioral health concerns. So if anyone that goes to the ER is there for a mental health diagnosis or a substance use diagnosis, we receive that report.
That's great.
And then depending on mental health or substance use, we'll send the case manager or a therapist. And if it's SUD, it's one of our substance use professionals that follow up.
Great.
For those of you who don't know, all the emergency rooms in Washington State and other states are actually uploading regularly. I don't know if it's real time or if it's daily or exactly how that works, to the EDI system, which is collective medical, more of the emergency room hospital side of things. And on the back end, collective medical also has an ambulatory. You may remember it called pre-manage in the early days. They've changed it to just collective medical ambulatory. It's the same database for patients. So if they're coming to the outpatient, if you were to write any kind of care coordination notes in there, so that when they do present to the ER looks at that as well, and can see any of your notes. These are not long history and physicals. These are elevator speech of what you want the ER to know if your patient presented to the ER. So a lot of people, it's a little difficult because it is an extra step of signing into another program and writing up your notes a second time. So it's more of this duplicative work, but you really don't want what you're putting in the EHR, you really don't want in collective medical. You really want bullet elevator speech type things in there. You can also put in there who the therapists are. So if there's any issues, the ER can actually can contact you too, if that's the case. And if you're interested, if you're not very familiar with it and want more information, you can reach out to Mariah or I. I encourage you to reach out to Mariah first as your practice facilitator, and she can get you more information and we can connect you with others who are using it. So it's a really good, when you're looking at ER follow-up for mental illness, alcohol, SUD, it's a really good tool to use to know who was in the ER, not just the ER that was closest to you, but any ER in the state. And you can probably go on their website. It's been uploaded. It's been updated since the last time I saw it, but they were in many states the last time I saw it. So it's a good system, coordination system to use. All right, thanks, Del.
Thank you.
For those of you who didn't know, Mike Lopez has resigned from Grant Integrated and has moved on to what I think was more of his dream of working in the schools. And so he's over at Quincy High School. So for those of you who worked with Mike Lopez, he's no longer at Grant Integrated, he is at Quincy High School. Just so you guys know. He's been with us, I believe, since the beginning. So some of you would want to know that. Moving on, Lisa, you're up next. If I can get the slides going. Do you want me to run the slides or would you like to run your own slides?
If you wouldn't mind, that'd be great.
Okay. There we go.
All right. So I'm presenting today on our Access to Care improvement project that we've been working on. Just to give a little bit of background, in February, I will have been working in the behavioral health industry for 30 years. And I can honestly say that for a good 15 of those, we have been trying to focus on how we can make access to care easier for folks in Okanogan County. And we have tried so many things. And what I'm going to be presenting on today is just kind of what we have chosen to focus on recently, knowing that this is, it's a journey, it seems like every single day. So why did we pick this and why has this been kind of our pet project for so long? To be honest with you, we weren't known for our immediate access to care at Okanogan Behavioral Health Care. In fact, we got a lot of feedback from our stakeholders and from our clients about how difficult it was and how long the wait was. And on the flip side of that, what we were noticing in our own internal processes is that not only was it difficult to get people in, but then by the time their appointment actually came around, they were no-showing left and right. So our no-show rate was through the roof and our retention rates were just dismal. So it really was something that even if we wanted to ignore it, we really couldn't. Go ahead and hit the next slide. So yeah, just to finish with that or continue with that topic, you know, when your board members are being contacted by local clinics that they can't get their patients in, you're definitely not going to ignore that. We also had, you know, with the invention of Facebook and social media, people are very willing to provide critical feedback, and that is definitely something that you don't want to see, but it happens. When we did tally our no-show rates, we knew that we had probably at least a 50% no-show rate for our evaluation and intake appointments on both the mental health and SUD side of things, and it actually turned out to be 68%. So, I mean, that's huge when you're talking, those are typically 2-hour appointments. And so to have providers sitting there with these huge blocks of time where patients weren't showing up and no real good follow through to kind of fill those slots at the last minute, you know, that was a huge and then the biggest one, I think, is when we realized this was a couple years ago, but it was our intake appointments on our SUD side were being scheduled 4 months out. So just think about that. I mean, you've got somebody that comes to the door and they're like wanting to make that change, and okay, you can make that change, but 4 months. I mean, what's going to happen in 4 months? What happens in a day for these folks that, that want to get clean and sober? So it was just, like I said, it was definitely something that we couldn't ignore. And I love the picture that I put on this slide, because that's really, we were like, oh my gosh. I mean, I think that kind of, when we actually sat down and started working on this, I think that was the look on all of our faces as a team. Next slide. So what were we wanting? Well, we're wanting same day appointment for our clients. That's where we really felt like, where we could have the biggest impact for folks. And we also, of course, wanted to reduce scheduled appointments, because we really felt like if we had a more flexible and fluid schedule, we could get people in easier. And when you schedule things and you block times out, it tends to snowball, and you end up pushing things further and further out on the appointment book. And of course, we wanted to minimize those no-show appointments. Our providers like an occasional no-show, let's be honest. It helps them get caught up on their paperwork. But when you have 3 or 4 in a week and they're 2-hour appointments, I mean, that's even too much for them. But the biggest part was going back to those, 4 months to get an appointment. If we don't capture the client when he or she wants to make that change, we're as good as lost them. If you've got, especially Loretta, I'm sure you know this as well. If you've got somebody that has decided that they want to stop using and you can't get them the help that they need at that particular moment, even if you wait until the next day, a lot can happen in a 24 or less than 24-hour period. You've got to, strike while the iron's hot and get them the help that they need right then and there. So that was really kind of that moment in time where we had to get them the help that they needed. Next slide. So what did we do? We really sat down as a group and tried to figure out, like I said, we've made so many changes in the last 15 years working on this particular thing, that it was really time for us to kind of sit down and think outside of the box. And one of the things that we had to ask ourselves was, what does the client expect when they call OBHC or when they walk through the doors? What is it that they're expecting? What is it when anyone calls a provider, whether in a community behavioral health setting or a clinic or, private practice? Their expectation is to get help and to get it quickly. And the other thing that we asked ourselves was, is OBHC the agency that we would want to bring a family member? If we had a family member that contacted us and said, hey, I really need some help, would OBHC be the place that we would send them? And it was scary when we sat around that table and asked each other that question, because really the answer in a lot of cases was no. Or if we contacted OBHC, we would probably pull some strings on the inside to get that person in quicker, just because they were a family member or somebody that we loved or really, knew that they needed that help. And those aren't the answers that you want to those questions. Your agency, you want your agency to be the one that you feel, the most proud of, and the one that is getting the help to the folks. So that was really where we started, is we had to figure out a way to make OBHC the agency where we would say, hey, if this was my son or my daughter or my husband or my, mother-in-law, whoever it was, they would be the ones that we would call in a heartbeat, no questions asked. The second thing we needed to do is we needed to kind of get out of our heads and stop talking and using our in-house language when it came to first visits and appointments and things like that. Typically in behavioral health, the first point of contact is called a request for service. And the first appointment is called an intake appointment, or in the SUD world, it was always referred to as an evaluation. And that's that 2-hour awful appointment where you basically sit down and answer 3,000 questions and fill out a ton of paperwork, and it's completely impersonal, and it's, and it takes forever. And so we really needed to kind of reframe that and think about what is it that the client wants or would expect when they come into OBHC. They don't want to sit down. I mean, they don't want to sit down for 2 hours and do a bunch of paperwork. If they're in a situation where, you know, they're really scared about how they're feeling, or they're depressed, they're not exactly sure what they want to do, they want to talk with somebody. They want to sit down face to face, or in our world, virtually, but somewhat face to face. And they want a little hope. You know, we might not be able to solve all their problems in a first face-to-face meeting, but if we can instill a little bit of hope with them, then we're on the right track. The second thing that we needed to do, or the third thing actually, is we needed to kind of not only reframe our team's way of thinking about this, but we also had to reframe our providers' way of thinking about all of this, and really look at, you know, how can we change what has been ingrained in them over the last 20 years as far as processes and kind of break that mold. That was actually really, really hard. Our providers are so used to doing what they do that they could do it in their sleep. And so, to be honest with you, that was probably one of the most challenging things to do, was to get our providers to think and be a little bit more flexible with this new vision that we had for accessing services at OBHC. And then, of course, we needed to also be able to, after we implemented these changes, we needed to get feedback from our providers and our clients. So we needed to figure out a system to be able to do that. Next slide. So what were some of our barriers? Well, to be honest with you, I think we actually took some of our clients off guard. To be honest with you, there are a lot of people that were so used to it taking forever to get services, and that they just thought, you know what, I'll make an appointment. I'll make my attorney happy that we went ahead and made an appointment, but I know I won't have to show up for another 4 months. And by then I'll probably no show anyways, because my problems will all be solved. So providing them a same day appointment, I think was really kind of a shock to them. And some of them were even like, oh, I'm not ready today. I can't, you know, can I have an appointment tomorrow? I can't really make it in today. So that was kind of interesting to see. It actually didn't take long. I think that was like for the first couple of weeks. And then finally the word in the town started changing, and people started to understand that they could get a same day appointment. The biggest thing, like I said just a second ago, is that our providers really struggled with the concept of flexibility. They were so used to, if a client comes in, they'd have to sit down with them for 2 hours and they'd have to, you know, do all of this paperwork and everything, that they weren't really accustomed to just sitting down and having a conversation with somebody. Because really what we did is we took the intake out of the equation. And what we said is, look, if we have a client that contacts us, we just want you to be able to sit down with them, spend 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it takes, to figure out what is it that that client really needs. Because a lot of them were coming to us, they didn't need an intake. Maybe they were just homeless. I don't want to say just homeless. Maybe they were homeless, and what they were dealing with was kind of a symptom of that homelessness. And so they didn't necessarily need an intake on that particular day or even within the next week. What they really needed was somebody to help them try to figure out where they're going to live and what are the resources out there for them. So by just engaging with the client and trying to figure out maybe a plan that may or may not include OBHC in the mix, really was that kind of out of the box thinking that we came up with. So instead of somebody coming in and wasting 2 hours of their time to do an intake, for us to determine, you know what, you really don't need to be in mental health services or SUD services. What we really need to do is hook you up with community action. We need to get you some resources for homelessness. We need to get you settled. We need to get you hooked up with the food bank. But you know that once you get this taken care of, here's some more resources, and here's OBHC's number. You can contact us at any time if you decide that you still want, you know, some help with maybe your drug and alcohol use or your depression that you're experiencing with. And then, of course, our third barrier, as we were just gaining momentum and doing really well, was darn COVID, because we had a system, we had it worked out, people were coming in, we were seeing them face to face, and then all of a sudden our world got blown apart. So we had to get creative, and we had to implement telemedicine, which we had been toying with for years, and never could quite get off the ground. But the silver lining to COVID, what I always say is that we got our telemedicine program up and running, and it's doing really well. So there's that. Next slide. So what were some of the changes that we did to kind of overcome those barriers? For one thing, we just gave it some time. Like I said, clients started becoming accustomed to being able to call OBHC or walk into our doors and being seen the same day. It didn't take very long, actually, for that word to get out on the street. And so that started to come around. We provided a lot of staff training. We reassured them that it was okay to feel kind of uncomfortable with the new process, and listened to their feedback and tried to, make little changes and tweaks based on what they were experiencing as they were doing the work. And then, of course, we've got a really strong telemed program that's up and running now. We still have I wouldn't say quite a few, but probably a handful of providers that have continued to work remotely through the pandemic. And even when we opened our offices back up, that was just something that they felt most comfortable with and preferred. And a lot of our clients actually preferred to continue doing it that way, which is nice, because now with the Delta variant coming back into play, and we're looking at, maybe restricting things again as cold and flu season and the Delta variant, start to ramp up. It's nice to be able to have the flexibility to go back to telemedicine as we kind of ebb and flow in this crazy time that we're living in. Next slide. I was going to put a graph in here, and I'm sorry I didn't. I was running short on time. One of the things that we're doing, just as a little bit of background through all of this, is that we discovered that tracking our data for any of our aims, including the access to care, it became very apparent that our current electronic health record was just not up to par when it came to running reports and getting data out of the system. Putting the data in the system was great. Pulling it back out was an absolute nightmare. So fortunately, our CEO, David, and our CFO, everybody was in agreement that we needed to do something different. So we are now in the process of implementing a new EHR, which I believe is supposed to be up and going October, November, I think. But where we are right now is that we've been able to average a 93% rate for same-day appointments on our mental health side of things. We've been able to hold that average for the last year. And in our substance use disorder program, 96%, which is, we set the goal at 100% because we just think that should always be the goal, right? You always want to do perfect all the time. But honestly, to be able to maintain something in the 90s was something that we couldn't believe happened and has happened. Now, there have been some difficult days when we haven't been able to do that. And to be honest with you, making some of these changes has created a hardship on some of our providers. So there was definitely kind of a call for a recess, so to speak. So our new clinical director, Quinn, has been working very closely with our staff to try to make sure that we are still providing these same-day services, but we're also not killing our providers in the process. So we've incorporated the use of some case managers and gotten kind of creative there. But it is definitely kind of a daily, it's just a daily thing that we look at. Next slide. So I don't think there's ever going to be an end to this aim. Even at 93 and 96%, like I said, every day is a new story. And with COVID coming down the pike, and as we're looking at more absences from work with staff getting sick, you know, those days are going to go up and they're going to go down as far as how we're able to provide same day access to our clients. But it's definitely something that we've just taken for granted that we have to monitor every single day. And I hope that we never lose focus of that, because our clients, I mean, that's our first point of contact, and we've got to make sure that they're having, you know, an immediate response to their request and that they're getting the services that they need. So that's it.
Thank you, Lisa. What a great presentation. Can we open it up for questions, discussion? I know Tom put a question in the Slack. I'm looking for it now. Would love to know what the reframe of admin time looks like.
That's a really good question. You know, one of the things that we did way back is we really looked at dissecting the appointments to figure out what truly has to be completed by a provider and what can be done by an administrative person, so that we could take as much off of the shoulders of the provider as possible. And so we went through every single form, every signature that was needed, and we dissected those. So we actually have what we call pre-intake workers that actually sit down with the patient, kind of like what happens at a hospital, you know, where you go to the desk and you fill out all the paperwork and sign all the forms and everything, and then you go to see the doctor. So we've got that set up now, where a patient will actually meet with a pre-intake worker to do all that fun stuff, and then leave the good juicy bits to the providers.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So Lisa, without a patient being, you know, through the assessment appointment and a assessed patient that is an admitted patient. Mm-hmm. So how do you bill for the time that you spend visiting with them for 15 minutes, figuring out what they need, that kind of thing? Is it an outreach with the clinicians? How do you do that?
Yeah, so both sides actually. On the SUD side, I think they call them information and referral appointments or something, and you could actually report those. And on the mental health side, they have something similar, and I think it's called outreach and referral. They're very, very close, but basically we can record up to 3 of those brief visits before we should be showing, you know, an intake or something to that effect. Typically what we find is that usually after that first visit, we can go ahead and get an intake scheduled or not. I mean, to be honest with you, the biggest piece is that we're able to kind of triage the client one way or the other to determine, 1, do they need an intake? 2, are they ready for an intake? And that's the biggest thing, is sometimes they're like, you know what, I'm kind of ready, but I'm not really motivated. Yeah, this sounds okay. So-and-so, my husband wants me to be here, but I don't really know if this is what I want to do, that sort of thing. So it gives us kind of an opportunity to gauge their motivation for that next step. And that's really where it's nice to have that flexibility to say, okay, well, you know what? I could see you again in another week and touch base with you, see how you're doing. That doesn't necessarily have to be a face-to-face visit. It could be a phone call or some sort of follow-up. And that's where it's nice, because it's saving us those 2-hour no-shows on our schedule, which was huge.
Lisa,
is there a question in the...
Tessa said, great job, Lisa, very impressive. Did you repurpose other staff to be the pre-intake workers, or did you add these positions? Just trying to figure out the cost of this type of restructure.
Yeah, we actually were able to pull from our medical records department, because they were so familiar with that paperwork anyways. I think we had 1 receptionist and 1 medical records department in the beginning that kind of helped us fetter out these, positions. And now they're just, I think they're an added position within our org chart. that we specifically hire for. Typically, it's somebody that moves from within OBHC into one of those roles, because you really need to have an understanding of the paperwork and how to explain it to patients and all of that stuff. So in the beginning, we actually used existing staff, Tessa, to answer your question, and now it's an added staff person.
Seems like you would have recouped the cost because you don't have no shows, which is.
What's that, Wendy? I'm sorry, it kind of broke up a little bit.
I said it seems like you would have recouped some of the costs because you don't have all the no shows, which is revenue lost.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were able, I mean, a provider's actually able to have, our clients really liked it because they were really able to get to why they were there much quicker, because the provider wasn't sitting down and having to do all that yucky paperwork with them, which was really kind of the biggest complaint. Our clients would come in and they're like, I didn't want to sit there and do 2 hours of paperwork. I just wanted to talk to you about why, you know, I feel the way I do. And so that was a big, that was just some really positive feedback that we got from our clients.
Right. Anyone else? I have one other question. I'm interested because as you're always told, every action gets an equal and opposite reaction. If you're letting all these people in the door now through access, how does the back end of case management then?
That's a really good question, because that's exactly where we found ourselves, is that we were doing such a great job getting people in the door, and then our providers' caseloads were just blowing up. And that was right about the time that, thank goodness, our new Chief Clinical Officer, Quinn, came on board, because he has a lot of experience with caseload management and how to be able to kind of expedite folks through the recovery process. To be honest with you, we had a lot of clients that weren't making progress like they should on people's caseloads. And so he was able to work with our providers, and still continues to do that. It's definitely a process to be able to kind of clean those up and get people that maybe weren't quite so motivated, you know, that were just used to kind of coming in and not really doing anything, to really get them more focused on what the goals were in their treatment plans and how to move forward. And if they weren't moving forward, how to maybe talk to them about taking a break and coming back when maybe they were more motivated. Thankfully, Quinn has been able to help us with that, because the providers were definitely feeling the pinch. They were like, oh my gosh, the floodgates have opened, and where do we put all these people? And so it's really about how do we take these people in, and then how do we keep them moving forward so that they're in and then they're out, that sort of thing. And yes, Dell, I'm glad you said that. We do see our clients. I think that was another thing, is we weren't seeing our clients weekly. And so that was just dragging everything out. And I think that was one of Quinn's big things, is that we need to be seeing our patients more frequently. And we also need to be doing, you know, case management. We need to be making the appropriate referrals to make sure that they're moving forward.
Anyone else?
You know, I think that's a good point. I think sometimes people, when they get referred for behavioral health, they just stay in behavioral health. And, you know, we have the same people on our caseloads that have been open for 20 years.
Exactly.
And really these doors should be evolving, and people need to be going back to primary care. And then if there's a crisis or a change need, they come back over to us for services. So
yeah, and one of the things that we didn't have, one of the things that we have now that we didn't have before is now we have our clubhouse, and we have some recovery support services and activities in place that we didn't have a couple years ago. So that also makes it easier for our providers to say, okay, you won't be seeing me weekly anymore, but these are some other things that they have been able to put in place just to kind of continue that support for the patients, so they don't feel like we're just booting them out the door and we're never going to see them again.
Great discussion. Anyone else? Well, thank you, Dell, and thank you, Lisa. Very, very good, both of them from the behavioral health. We hear a lot of primary care presentations, so it's really good to see two excellent behavioral health presentations. So thank you. On to the one that is very interesting. Now you have to listen to me, and I'm sorry for that, but please listen with open ears and an open mind. I hope you were able to review the proposed plan and maybe some of the questions that were asked underneath the slides, and really would like to have a robust discussion after this to make sure we're on the right track. And this is not set in stone, but we're not moving drastically either. We are open for some tweaks and some slight changes. And I'll go into that in just a minute. But just a little background, because we have a lot of new people and I want to make sure we're grounded and we're all on the same page. As you know, the Medicaid Transformation Project was originally planned as just a 5-year project ending at the end of this year. We believe that there will be a 6th year. It's been approved by the legislature. I don't believe it's been approved by CMS as of yet, or I haven't heard if it has. If it has, it's been just within the last week or so, but I don't believe it has. They had some changeover in leadership. The delay isn't necessarily because of us. They've had a lot of changeover in leadership, and with that change, they had to get new leadership in place before they can evaluate the plans. And I think that's where we're at. Leadership's in place now, they're evaluating the plan, so we should know something soon. The MTP, Medicaid Transformation Project, was guided by this toolkit of 6 different areas. Well, 8, we chose 6. And you saw those represented in the original change plan if you were around then. It was very clinical focused, even though they wanted us to work on social determinants of health. Reimbursement on pay for performance for us was very clinical. It was based on clinical organizations moving metrics and transforming care. The social determinants of health will ultimately move the data and bring people into better quality of health. That's just going to take longer than 5 years. You get quick, easy wins within the healthcare system. And both Dell and Lisa demonstrated that today, and previous presentations have demonstrated that. I have to see, what did I put on the slide again? Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So the NCACH shaped the WPCC based on that toolkit, and we were very guided by structure from the toolkit. After 2021, we are no longer bound to a toolkit. On the same token, our board, we have a strategy work group, which is board members and a couple staff members, are looking at what the future of the North Central ACH is actually going to look like. So who are we outside of this toolkit? What do we want to be? Who do we want to be? What do we want to accomplish? What's best for our community? We also found that, and some of you who are on the call can attest to this, is that we were all over the place because we were working in silos of primary care or outpatient behavioral health and primary care, acute care, which is the ED and the EMS. And then you have care coordination, which is originally Pathways Hubs and now is a different model. You have CHIs, you have the opioids, and every single one of us had different application process, and every one of us had different reporting mechanisms, and every one of us had different MOUs. And it was crazy for some of you who had multiple MOUs with us, understanding what is what, who is who, and what is due when, because we were all different. Our meetings were different, our reporting periods were different, and it was chaotic. So as a staff, we wanted to come together and say, how can we streamline this? Not only for our own sanity, but also the sanity of those we work with. And how can we make it easier across the board? So we are streamlining our contracting. We're streamlining we'll call it application process, for lack of better words. And streamlining the reporting across all the projects so that it actually aligns. It'll also enable us to pull the data easier because the reporting will be similar. With that, the WPCC needs to align with the other work of the ACH as we were moving forward. One of the things that you guys are aware of is that WPCC is the only group within ACH that received a base funding. You received a base funding based on Medicaid lives, not because you did anything necessarily, but because you had so many Medicaid lives. One of the things that as I was thinking about this is, in all of our improvement work, we've encouraged you to make system changes based on your systems, not based on the payer. So irregardless, because we want these system changes across the board because they're good for all patients, not just Medicaid patients when you're looking at A1Cs and PHQ-9s and hospital follow-ups. And we didn't want a system that is only for Medicaid clients, and then you do something for Medicare clients, and then you do something for private payer. That just is not going to work, and we recognize that. However, we reimbursed based on Medicaid lives. So if you had more Medicaid lives, you had more money, received more money from us than if you had less Medicaid lives, even though maybe your total patient care could be the same. Your patient panels could be very similar. And so there was some disparity there. So we were looking at that as we were transitioning. And the current system is built on that pay for reporting, pay for participation, not necessarily paying for outcomes and moving forward. Even though we've been encouraging it, we don't base the payments on that. That's the current system. What I heard last meeting and with our focus group is that you value the opportunities for collaboration and learning from your peers. The learning activities are helpful and drive improvement because they're focused and provide opportunity for collaboration and learning evidence-based practices. And there's value in subject matter expert presentations. I heard from some of you that funding was important, but not the driving force. Without the funding, initiatives may or may not continue depending on organizational priorities. There's still a lot of internal improvement work that needs to be done. And cross-sector partnerships are time-consuming and challenging. An external facilitator could help keep things on track and or move things forward. Funding could help with experimenting with the PDSA cycles. So the focus group, the email was sent after our last meeting. We had 6 individuals who responded to the email or to the when to meet poll, and we had 4 actually attend. There ended up being a conflict with the other 2. I met with the focus group on 2 occasions to create the current version of the plan. So I presented we talked about the old plan, the one I presented last month, had a lot of in-depth discussion, a lot of conversation. And so then I took that information and I came back to the focus group a second time with a new plan based on their recommendations. And the focus group included Tessa Timmons from Confluence Health, Shania from Samaritan Healthcare, Mary Louise from Chelan Valley Community Health, and Stephanie Dallin.
I'm Columbia Valley, sorry.
Oh my goodness. I so know that. I am so sorry.
That's what
Yeah,
I have to do.
Can I blame it on the smoke? Oh wait, smoke is gone. My apologies. I'll fix that before we get it uploaded. Stephanie Dallin from Moses Lake Community Health Center and Kurt Kuykendall, who's from Samaritan Healthcare. He attended the second meeting and provided feedback. So this is what we have come up with. And I will preface this to say that this is what we came up with at WPCC, but this is what we're looking at, very similar for the ACH as a whole as we're looking at systems versus just sectors. So the first one is, and you'll see in the blue is kind of the overarching and then some things underneath, is we felt like we wanted to continue to host a meeting. That was very evident in the polling that we did during the last meeting. It's an opportunity for partner sharing. We can bring some subject matter experts into that. We can determine the cadence, if it's going to continue monthly, if you want to do it bi-monthly or quarterly, we can always change it. We can change the date and time. We can do whatever we want on that. Potentially combine it with transitional care diversion intervention partners, the acute care partners. John leads that work group, and half of his work group are also WPCC meeting members. So for those of you who tend to both, this would then just be one meeting for you. It would also provide that opportunity from acute care to outpatient. So we can combine that. This would be an optional meeting. There's no longer going to be base funding, so it would be considered an unfunded meeting, but still an opportunity for you to come together. And we can work with you to design the meeting so that it continues to be valuable for those who attend. And I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions or comments before I go through all of it. And feel free to chat in if you prefer. I'm moving things around, so I'm looking at you, but it's on another screen. Any comments? Feedback? Do you like it? Do you not like it? What do you think about combining with your TCDI partners? Oops. Should be sharing again. Sorry about that.
Go ahead and share in the chat if there's things that you're like, that you affirm, or the whole thing looks good. I just say from Lisa, or if there's suggestions that you have for improvement or questions.
All right. I'm not gonna ask. I was looking at my other questions. I'm gonna keep going, and I do have some more in-depth questions on the next few slides. So we decided we're going to continue with the focused learning activities in some fashion. We're still figuring out what that would look like. It's voluntary participation as it is now. We want to continue the momentum of the population health plan. I heard that from you guys last month. So if you're interested in continuing what we're currently working on, if there are new things, we can do it within just in the clinical partners. But then we're looking at what are other learning activities that we can do that can be cross-sector. For example, could we design a learning activity that is social determinants of health, that we are bringing different stakeholders together to do something together. The topics can be determined by the collaborative. We are really focused on care coordination and behavioral health. That just seemed where the momentum was or is within the ACH in general. And so we would like to keep it within those guardrails when we're looking at learning activities. We can also design sprints that are more of a planning that will lead to a more multi-sector. Thinking of some communities have an issue they want to work on. And so we design, say, like a human-centered design sprint that's over a few weeks. And it's really about bringing those different partners together to design the solution for whatever it is they're trying to work on. At the end, there could potentially be some funding for that. So some cross-sector type learning activities. We have done $10,000 per activity reimbursement for organizations. We are working on our budgets, but initial conversations, I think we'll continue some of that. Just to be able to reimburse for the time it takes out of your normal other schedule, away from your other work, to work on these activities. It's no longer going to be reimbursed based on participation or turning in quote unquote homework. It will be based on when you see the learning activity, it'll say by the end of the session, you will have done X, Y, Z. So you will have to complete 3 deliverables. And one of the examples I'm using is we have talked about doing a QI sprint for the clinical and for the non-clinical like community-based organizations. And with that would teach them, how do you put together a QI team? How do you create a charter? How do you do PDSAs? And so some of that work you can see is very hands-on. So that's what they would, in order for payment, then they have to have some of those deliverables met. Does that make sense? So that's the second item on learning activities, being mindful of that you guys wanted to continue your internal work with the learning activities. Any questions? What do you think about joint learning activities? Joint meeting, clinical, non-clinical? A thumbs up.
So Wendy, when you say clinical versus non-clinical, you're talking about like a clinical setting versus like, say, community action or something like that, one of those other, or what? Okay.
Yeah. We have, right now, Caroline is working with Upper Valley Men, I think their fire department, and I think Cascade Medical. That's kind of like a cross-sector type partnership.
Yeah.
That's trying to solve an issue within their community. So that would be an example of something like that.
I mean, I think that's kind of nice because then you get an opportunity also to learn about their systems and their challenges and whatnot and have a dialogue with them that you might not normally have just because the opportunity wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Wendy, I might jump in from leading and working with other groups. I think, the nice perspective I see with these changes for everyone is that I know it'll provide some of the flexibility, since everyone is a little bit different, to really focus on the things you need to address in your region and work with the exact partners. I know some people have wanted to work with law enforcement more on the behavioral health side, and there's opportunities out there with that a little bit more when you look at that collaboration. As well, I know like even like Cooley Medical Center in the Grand Coulee area, they don't have the same kind of community resources out there as you may in Moses Lake or Wenatchee. And so it allows the flexibility to really focus on what you have access to. So it's really good. I also would say, I don't know if Deb's on the phone anymore because I don't see names, but I know our community partners, I'll channel my Deb Miller a little bit, has been interested in working with clinical more so, and I know our clinical partners have always tried to figure out how to better combine and partner with the community partners, and there's always been a little bit of a disconnect there that hopefully bringing it together would help and will help bridge some of that language gap.
Are you asking me to concur or to expand on your comment? I definitely concur with what you're saying.
Or you could tell me I'm completely wrong.
Yeah, no, I don't
speak for you.
No, I don't think you are. And I've got a couple examples, the conversation just at the end of Dell's presentation today, and an opportunity for us to better partner on a QI project around shared response to clients that are overutilizing the ED. Another good example that kind of got started through the whole person care but lost ground was our partnership with diabetes education, and the Catholic Charities case managers. Another thing just for partners to know, we have additional funding from DOH to do diabetes specific work as outpatient health educators. And also we are just getting ready on October 1st to launch the Heart Health Ambassadors program with DOH that is hypertension focused health education. So those are the things that I would love to see us partner more on. And we would benefit as a community organization. We've never had health outcomes to be able to show the value of our work to our clinical partners. So how can we have some shared opportunity that, that's just an example for us. We have lots of other partners who do community-based work, but we're not able to show the value. So how can we partner with health systems to be able to show more of our value?
Thanks, Deb. Okay. So again, you guys stated there was some internal improvement that needed to be made, and we're moving away from the base payments, but we do recognize that improvement work costs money. So the next bucket is more of a individual organizational funding, and this would apply to improvement work that you want to do as it pertains to behavioral health and care coordination. And care coordination, I should say, is in the broader sense of care coordination, multi-sector collaboration, that type, not just the clinical care coordination. Like, how are we coordinating across systems? So this would allow for that. It would you would have your scope of work. I call it deliverables. You would have your scope of work of saying what you would accomplish. You would have to accomplish that for payment. And then there would be other things such as reporting, the way you report, and presentations that would be required to either your peers here or other community coalitions. Those details are being worked out by ACH staff. We haven't set the funding amount. We're still working on that as we work through budgets, as we present these plans to the board as well. So if you're a board member, keep your WPCC hat on now, and you'll hear more at the board meeting because I know a few of you are. So we're working on that. We're working on what that looks like. We wanted to keep the buckets lower for the organizational because we really want to push organizations to more multi-sector, but we recognize that there could be some internal work that may be more costly. So we're looking at how can we then do buckets, and what do those buckets look like? So I just, as an example, say maybe under 25, 25 to 75, and greater than 75, and putting some parameters and guardrails on those, what those buckets would look like. And it had to be a really transformational project to be more than 75, just so you're aware of that. We are really moving towards driving change. Like I said earlier, we've been a pay for reporting, pay for participation, and now we're looking for some outcomes and change. We're not looking to say that you've improved this by 100%, but what transformational changes are you make so that in a few years, because we know that data, it takes a while sometimes for data to catch up, what changes are you making that can affect the data? We feel like over the last 3 years with WPCC funding, we're at the end of the 4th year that we've provided ample opportunity to get a lot of the foundational work done, or at least moving, and that's where that momentum is. So finishing that up so that you can continue forward. So that's the next bucket. I will stop there and get your comments on this one. You can chat it in or you can unmute, either way.
Well, I just want to say I like it for a couple different reasons. The biggest one, I think, is that I'm glad to see the toolkit go away and for us to be able to focus on things that really, I think, are going to impact our individual organizations as well as our specific communities. Because I feel like we all have a pretty good idea of what those projects are, but like for us, trying to figure out how a behavioral health care agency was going to focus on diabetes, we struggled a lot with trying to get those things. So I just appreciate having more flexibility to work on what we feel like is most important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anyone else? Don't be shy to unmute yourself. I personally like it because I hate being the teacher. I think Mariah will agree with me in taking attendance and did you do this and did you turn your homework in? Like, I hate that part. Like, I feel like we are all adults and or we should just be able to accomplish things, but that's just the system that was set up. And if we ever had auditors, we needed to be able to show that this is how we kept track to ensure payments. And so I'm glad to be done with that and that we can truly look for change. And I agree with you, Lisa. I think there are some issues that you may want to do. This does mean, just so you're aware of, the opposite side of that is we're moving away from that collaborative approach where everyone's working on the same thing or similar things and driving that change. Now everyone's going to be working on their own thing. And then you may have some organizations working on similar things, but if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, but it would also be kind of nice to know what the other organizations are working on, because that might give us an opportunity to reach out or, you know, either to ask questions or be supportive of, you know, if I know, for instance, that, you know, Confluence Health, who's right across the street from us, is working on whatever. I mean, it's good information to know, because we do try to work closely with our neighbors and our partners in the community.
Yep. And your issues in Okanagan may be different than the healthcare issues, say, in Grant County, so that you guys could come together. And it could be something completely different that the Grant County ones are working on. Okay, any other comments? Dale said he likes that the amounts are paid on deliverables versus participation. This gears more towards change versus everyone come together and see what sticks. I agree. Okay.
So this means, oh, I'm sorry. And
no,
so this means our monthly reporting will go away after this year? Yes, no?
Yeah, so everything that we've been doing as WPCC will be changed because your MOUs end at the end of December, will be changed for January. And so there will be new, once we figure it out as an ACH, once we get approval. So once we figure it out, once we get approval from the board, then we would present it out to our partners, because then there would be, we're still grappling with application versus no application, because there are things that kind of land in our lap and we know we've worked with people and we know what it is and we want to push funding that way. We don't want to continue jumping through hoops. But we need, even with that, if there's no application, we still need guardrails to make sure certain items are checked off. One of the things that we are focusing on as an ACH is being more intentional about health equity and social determinants of health in the work we're doing. So we're going to be asking those questions of, how will this work affect health equity within your organizations? Have you thought about it? How will this address social determinants of health in your agency? So those are questions we're going to be asking, so that you are thinking about it, because when it comes to reporting, that is going to be that will be something in the report as well. So more to come on that, more solid details to come. Our next one is, we don't want to lose the thread of multi-sector collaboration. We feel like this is how you're going to change systems. If we continue to look inwardly and focus only on ourselves and not reaching out to our fellow partners, we're going to lose out. And if we're only doing it within clinical, you're missing a whole entire group of organizations that could help drive change, that you can work with, that you can partner with. And we recognize that not everyone is there. That's why we had the previous bucket. But we want to offer some type of multi-sector funding opportunities. As we are designing this, we're looking at how can we incentivize this to a greater degree than we do organizational improvement. Like I said, with the organizational improvement, we've been doing this for the last 4 years. And we've given out a lot of money over the last 4 years. I think it's almost $1 million just in base payments that we send out a year to our organizations. And so what if we transition that and send it out for system changes within communities? What can we do with that funding? How can we work together with our schools, with our law enforcement, with our jails, with our community-based organizations, with our DSHS, with, and I could go on and on. Like, we think that we don't have community-based organizations, and we may not have CBOs, but we have transit in some shape or form in all of our systems. We have food banks in all of our systems, in most of our towns. We have DSHS that covers the patients in our towns. How are we working with them? Like, we've never worked with them. Like, how can we work with them? Like, there are just a lot of opportunities that we could really work towards. as we expand some of this multi-sector. We just have to open our thinking, and ACH staff can help with that. You won't be on your own. So I'll stop there and get your feedback on this one. Feel free to type, feel free to unmic, unmute, unmic. I don't know what the right term is, but Loretta's getting exciting. That's good to hear. Are others getting exciting? Does this excite you, or does this like overwhelm you? Because last month you guys were overwhelmed. That was quite evident. You went, oh, whoa, Nancy, that ain't gonna work for us. And we heard you. So I hope that you can see in this new plan that we heard you loud and clear.
I think this is better, and I like that we're going to be also offering some funding to those other organizations, because I mean, I know that OBHC has really good working relationships with a lot of the CBOs in our area, and there are things that we could work on, and it would be nice to be able to say, hey, there's an opportunity where we could try to improve and make a little, you know, cover our costs to do it.
Thanks, Lisa. Maddie from America dropping out, but she said as an MCO, they would love opportunity to further discuss supporting and or sponsoring multi-sector work. It would be great to get our MCOs, and we're having conversations, some of the MCOs, and they're having their conversations too internally and with other MCOs, so, and across the state. Anyone else?
Just to piggyback on that, Wendy, you know, just looking at, you know, our MCO partners, you know, they have deliverables to the healthcare authority. And so to be able to align those so that, you know, we're working on projects that then are benefiting our MCOs as well, you know, with all these partners, I think that's what's exciting to me, is that, you know, we can make plans that are going to be able to meet a lot of different targets and benefit our patients.
Great point, Loretta.
Wendy, I just wanted to confirm, we either choose one or the other, right? Either we work on an internal process, or we work on improving a process with another organization.
You know, systems are large, and if systems are able to work on two, I'm sure there could potentially be funding for two, because they're two. There won't be overlap, though. You can't have the overlap, because then you're double dipping in funding. But you could be saying having a transition ED for behavioral health, and you're working with your different systems, and that's where your multi-sector collaboration is. And then your internal could be on diabetes. There's no overlap between those. So the details are still being worked out, but that's one thing that we have to ensure. We've done that all along to make sure if you submit a TCDI proposal, it doesn't cross over into your WPCC work. And opioid, it doesn't cross it. You know, like we have done that. We will continue to do that, so there's not double dipping into funding.
Okay.
So Wendy, this is Linda. This morning when the ACH executive directors had their call with the healthcare authority, the healthcare authority wanted to know what the ACHs were doing in year 6, and then maybe into the future. I don't know if everybody on this call knows, but the healthcare authority is submitting another waiver at the end of this year. And that waiver would be from 2025 to 2030, because hopefully we'll have our bridge year next year, and then we'll have 2023 and 24 to continue to draw down the funds. That's how the whole transformation project was set up. So some of the ACHs have said, and I will share once I get the minutes with Wendy, because we don't have any details, but in moving forward, some of their ideas in their new contracts are to have incentives for partnerships. So like one entity working with another, and there'd be a financial incentive. And once we can learn from some of those ACHs, it was King County and it was North Sound. Because we as ACHs, we all kind of copy something that works in somebody's area. And that's how we've learned a lot, by not starting from scratch at times. So once we get those details, and Wendy will be taking the lead on that. I just haven't had a chance to tell her. Maybe there'll be more things we can learn from other ACHs on the type of contracts they set up to reach what she just mentioned, the transformational change.
That is what we've talked about. That's what this is, that multi-sector, like how do we incentivize those partnerships? We know they're hard. We recognize that. You guys have made it clear. It takes time. That doesn't mean you're on it alone. ACH is willing to work with you and help guide some of those conversations as well. Anything else? Okay. So the last few things, where are we at on time? 12:41, I have 4 minutes. So I'll go through this. I think we'll get through this quick. We will continue to offer technical assistance, facilitation, and access to subject matter experts. If we hold the contract, say with CSI, CCMI, that's just one example. How can we leverage their expertise within each individual organizations versus you going out and have to contract on your own? Maybe you want to work with an organization with your community, but it may be intimidating, more difficult to help build that relationship. We can come in as staff and help facilitate those relationships and those meetings initially until there's more comfort level that you guys are working on your own for your improvement. And if you need internal facilitation for your own QI project, some of you have really taken advantage of Mariah's time, that will also be available. And we'll continue keeping our ear to the ground, understanding our local issues, and advocating, educating on a local, a regional, and a state level with MCOs, Healthcare Authority, our state partners, our legislatures. Will continue doing that on the behalf of North Central Region. And so we have 3 minutes for additional comments, questions, feedback. Exciting, not exciting? You want to chat? Chat, reservations, chat, exciting now, everyone.
I think it's exciting because it's there's a lot more flexibility.
Great. Well, I know I have at least 3 people on the call with me. Yes, a lot to figure out, Stephen. A lot of decisions to make, but hopefully this will help some of those improvement projects that you've been talking about internally, and you're thinking we'd like to do this, but we don't have the funding to try these PDSAs about. That's what the ACH is about, is innovation and creativity. Sometimes you get funding and you have to do exactly what you say you're going to do. We are more like, if it's not working, let's work together to change it and go in a new path. So it could potentially open up opportunities to test the waters. Okay. I'm going to put together a survey because I know this was a lot. I'll send it out. That way you would have, if you want to talk to your team members about this, if you have additional questions or comments or reservations you didn't want to type or unmute yourself to say, I'm going to have that out to you by tomorrow. We'll close it at the end of the week because we'll need to wrap things up from a WPCC perspective as we continue moving as an ACH as a whole and presenting to our board. So. Don't forget Population Health Land tomorrow. Bring your ideas of where you may be stuck. We'll work through them. QI Affinity Group the last Wednesday. And then our next meeting is on October 4th, and we'll have presentations by Cooley Medical Center. So Shoshana, I see you're on the phone, and Shania Samaritan Healthcare. So that's, I think, in 3 weeks because this is a late meeting. So look forward, I'll be in touch with you on those, but here's your heads up for that. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.